far from everyone.
Yeah, I'll just announce everyone to come in and
come a little bit forward, because I feel like...
Yeah, I know, yeah, talking to an empty room, yeah, sorry.
Like I'm in a conference.
Yeah.
We've got a small intimate group, so might as well bring them together. Just flick this up when you're ready to speak. Okay, it will perfect. Thank you. Same for you.
Yeah, thank you. This is working brilliant. Right. So it's like maybe a minute introduction from me, 2 minutes, something like that. So yeah, cool. Hello. Oh, there we go. Right. Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming to the Game Dev group. Do people want to kind of move like from the bar and kind of fill the space in the middle, because it's a bit sparse, so it should be nice to. Yeah, just so we're talking to people. We can look in the eye and actually pick people out of the audience and stuff then. So yeah, I think most people have been before, or at least know what the Game Dev group is. But just for those who haven't, we are a community of game developers who get together twice a month now to meet, learn, collaborate, and say hello. And many of you will know the drill by now, but that say hello is basically just sort of to encapsulate being the most welcoming, awesome, inclusive game developers that we possibly can be the best community that we can be, and yeah, just build it into the biggest, best, most useful resource in Leamington and the UK and the world one day. So I always like to start these things by saying a massive thank you to everyone who's come along tonight. Thank you to Dee Dee especially. So Dee Dee you'll know from LinkedIn and from the meetup page. So Dee Dee is just absolutely wonderful to work with. Just does all the good stuff that makes the events so much better than they were when I was running them, because I'm busy doing other stuff during the day. So Dee Dee absolutely is smashing it in the minute. It's just a pleasure to work with. So thank you, Dee Dee. Thank you as well to everyone who gets involved with the community. Obviously we have the Discord, we're on social media, we run the game jams, which people get involved in, make games, vote on games, play them, etc. Get involved in the Bring Your Own Games events that we put on as well, and just, yeah, thank you to everyone who just gets stuck in and makes it the best place to be. Thank you to all of our speakers. So Rita, you'll get added on there beyond this event. So we've had, numerous speakers come in and actually give us talks on sharing their expertise, and it just wouldn't happen. It wouldn't be where we wouldn't be where we are now without them. So massive thanks to anyone who's ever given a talk. And also thank you to our sponsors. So obviously One Mill Street gives us our phenomenal home, makes it look like a legit thing that we do because of what a special place it is, and just excellent people to work with in terms of partners. They couldn't want for more. They have spaces available, so the offices and things that you see, they've got the co-working upstairs, which is where I work. So if any of you are interested in a bit of a communal workspace, you can work down here for free, or you can pay to be upstairs. Playground games, obviously I'm sure a lot of you know that we're running recruitment events for Playground, running those. We've done 2, we've got 3 more to go, focused around recruiting and getting people into roles in Playgrounds, and again, just wonderful partners to work with. They just couldn't ask for more. Black Cat is an indie studio, that's Luke, if you know Luke. I'm actually working with Luke on the UEFM project that we got funded for. He's a designer and is building a studio to build games in the area and to kind of employ from juniors and to get people into the industry. And also sorcery.gg, so you'll see Millie, who has set up the biggest, most amazing games jobs database that's on the market. I think at last look there's about 20,000. Sorry, no problem. Yeah. 20,000 jobs on there listed. So if you're looking for work and you want to go search on there, go to sorcery.gg. Couple of things, so some housekeeping actually quickly. So if you have a drink or a beer or whatever and you want to go outside for smoke or a vape or whatever, please don't take your glasses with you because Mill Street will lose their license. So please just leave them inside. If you need the loo, there is one behind us, but please don't use that because obviously it'll be a bit of a distraction. There's some around there as well. So that's the housekeeping. And we've got a few events coming up. So you will have seen, hopefully, that DD's just announced the GDG Game Jam 4.0, so it's our 4th one. We're running these quarterly now, so there's one every 3 months. Just building in popularity, and we're getting some really cool stuff coming out of them now. Team from last year who won have just, in fact I've got the shirts with me, so they won a load of GDG shirts and stuff. So yeah, if you want to get stuck in and make some games, that's on itch.io. It's all being run remotely. On the 16th to the 23rd of March, our next talk is with Stuart Main. So this is a real throwback to Stuart was our very first speaker. So it was we had a panel and Stuart was on there. He's actually just released a book and is going to be talking about that and the 10 big lessons that he's learned from his 3 decades in the games industry. So that's on the 27th of March. And just today we're running with Interactive Futures. So we're actually helping Warwickshire County Council organise Interactive Futures, which is happening. And you're hearing it here first because it was literally decided about 3 hours ago that it's going to be running on the 13th and 14th of June. So that's us. The last one, we had the Indie Pit. We took some indie developers with us to show off their games. I think one of them may even have got a publishing contract off the back of showing their game there, which was awesome. If they didn't, they were definitely in talks. So yeah, it's just going to be a phenomenal event again. Really looking forward to that. So put it in your diaries. And you know, if you like what we do, give us a thumbs up. If you don't, give us a thumbs down, that's fine. I think Meetup will send you an email saying, did you have a good time? If you want to give us 5 stars, great. If you want to give us 1 star, fine too. Hashtag the GDG on socials. So all of our socials, I always get told off by DD because I never share this. So I put it on the presentation, DD, so don't tell me off. Linktree, the GDG, that's got all of our socials, all of our upcoming events. I think the itch page is on there as well, so everything that you want to know about it. Okay, not yet, but it will be. Yeah, everything you want to know about the GDG will be on Linktree, and that's it from me. So yeah, this is Rita. So really looking forward to the talk from Rita tonight. So she's come all the way from London. So a big round of applause to welcome Rita, please.
Hello. Hi everyone.
That's the clicker to get through the presentation.
I'm here as a lawyer, but I don't want to make this really boring and really dry. So I've tried to minimise the law stuff as much as possible. And really, I just want to talk about opportunities in game development using blockchain and AI, which are 2 areas that I work with when advising tech companies. And I just want to kind of talk about some things that are kind of trending at the moment, seeing what you guys are doing as well, what kind of things you're interested in developing, and at the end, if you have any specific questions about, you know, I'm thinking of doing this or doing that or whatever, and you just want to kind of see what the legal position might be, we can have a chat around that as well. So let's get into it. So I'm going to be talking about AI and blockchain in gaming development. So various different trends are happening with AI in gaming development, as you know, like it's a big theme at the moment, and blockchain as well with NFTs in games, which I know is a controversial topic with game studios about, you know, whether or not you want to use NFTs and how you want to use NFTs. But there's various different legal implications with using both of these technologies in game development, so we're going to talk about those things. So what we're going to address here is how AI and blockchain are reshaping game development, opportunities and legal challenges in 3 key areas. So firstly, we're going to be talking about NFTs in games and virtual environments. So I will talk a little bit about my background in a moment, but virtual environments can also mean, to me, things like Metaverse, which I've used NFTs in that capacity. AI-generated worlds, so I know lots of game design is changing because people are using AI to generate environments. AI-powered NPCs and adaptive gameplay. So we're going to be talking about all those 3 things. But firstly, I just want to do a quick survey, so please interact with me so I can know who I'm talking to. Does anyone use blockchain in gaming or NFTs in gaming? Brilliant. Can you tell us just a little bit about the use case?
Yeah, we produced a game for Trowers that we use for them in terms of visuals. So you could go in and basically buy NFTs with game currency sorry, you can buy NFTs with game currency. Originally I was surprised in order to own those NFTs going forwards, but it didn't go very well in the end. Actually, the owner of an old supplies closed it down. We were fine.
Right. Okay. Something I'm going to touch on. Yeah. Okay. And what about AI in game development? Using AI in game environments? Anyone? Again, do you want to tell us a bit about it?
Yeah. So we're using AI for generating voiceover for some of the stuff that we're doing at the moment. We're also we've used AI to get us kickstarted with some script writing, though we then manually edit that. We use it for concept art, though not in game art. What else we do? Copilot, so using AI for kind of helping with the coding side of things.
Cool. Has anyone used AI to create NPCs or characters, avatars? Anyone use that? 3D AI? No? Has anyone used in-game currency? Does anyone use in-game currency with any games that they've developed? Or is anyone thinking about using that? No? Okay, cool. Well, we'll talk about all of that. So a bit about me. I'm a partner at a law firm called Gunnar Cook. I do a lot of tech work. I do commercial advisory and disputes. So my practice is very broad ranging, but essentially what I enjoy is advising on how the law meets what's happening in tech, which doesn't always marry up because tech is moving much faster than the law. But what I really enjoy is to help people do what they want to do creatively and figure out a way that we can make the law work. So usually there's a way, and I'll come to what happens when there's not a way, but usually we can find a way to make it happen. I'm also the CEO and founder of a company called Rita Sheth, which is a fashion tech company. So we're using generative AI to create fashion, and in the past I've done both digital fashion, NFTs, but also with a use case to help actual brands and designers create physical fashion as well. And in that capacity, I've done activations in the Metaverse, so Metaverse events, which touches on kind of gaming. So although I haven't created a game, I've kind of worked with that kind of space in the Metaverse. And some interesting stuff happening in the Metaverse. I don't know if it's going to take off or if it's not. It kind of stalled a little bit when NFTs kind of crashed out a bit, but hopefully I really enjoy the Metaverse, so let's see what happens. In that capacity, I've worked with blockchain and I've worked with generative AI, machine learning, and other types of AI. So what I can help you with is B2B commercial agreements. So anytime you want to license something, you want to do a SaaS agreement, or any kind of enterprise level integration, I can help you with those commercial agreements. Regulatory compliance, so anything to do with data protection, AI, sometimes crypto comes into gaming now, that's all regulatory compliance stuff. Consumer side terms, so just to make sure that your terms and conditions represent what your game is going to do and make sure that you don't put yourself in any liability on that side of things. Distribution platforms, so if you're going to sell your game on other platforms, if you're going to have a mobile app version, all of those kinds of things I also cover. And also contentious, so a lot of times things go wrong, people get into disputes, they infringe on people's IP, many things can happen that are contentious. Contractual disputes, outsourcing disputes if you're using other developers, all kinds of disputes, I also deal with those kinds of things as well. So if in doubt whether I can help on anything, just ask. If there's anything that you're unsure about, that you just need kind of a view, ask me, email me after the talk. I'm always happy to kind of give my input on where I can help. So the legal landscape of blockchain and AI in gaming is that things are developing really quickly and the regulation's really slow. And one of the areas that you can see that is obviously on AI regs. At the moment in the UK, we don't have anything. In the EU, they have passed the EU AI Act, which is quite an impressive piece of legislation. I think it's quite well thought out. In the UK, it's more kind of let's wait and see what happens and let's monitor things. But essentially, I think because we're so close to the EU and so many things will impact on EU consumers, you can more or less take the guidance that you should be following the EU AI Act and see what it says and try and comply with that as much as possible if it affects you. There's also various things happening on the crypto side. If you use crypto or even NFTs or tokens, there's also kind of regulation kind of moving on that side, and it's a little bit in confusion as to what is actually regulated and what is not. And I've advised a couple of clients recently on perimeter issues. So do you fall into this regulatory kind of, are you caught by it or not? And that's sometimes a difficult question to answer. It depends on the facts. And also it's somewhere where I can add value, because sometimes it's about, you can structure it this way or that way to make sure that you fall outside of it and you're not caught. And sometimes it's a case of do the best you can and say sorry later. Assess the risk and versus the reward. So with a lot of areas in law right now, it's just, we don't know. That there's no clear-cut answer. It could be that, potentially under the current law you might be infringing, but so many other people are doing it, it's likely that they'll adjust the law to make sure that, not a million people are infringing on the law at one time. So we're in a bit of a grey area right now, and it's a bit of a kind of wait and see what happens. So the first area I want to talk about is NFTs in games and virtual environments. And one example that I've put down there is Decentraland, because I'm really familiar with it. I've worked in it. I've created NFTs to sell in Decentraland. It's a metaverse. It's not a game. There are games in there, but various games also have experimented with using NFTs in their games. And basically, I'm sure you all know what this is, but basically people can create NFTs, they can create skins, assets, even virtual lands, and they can buy and sell those NFTs. And it's a way of, for the benefits for game developers, it's a way of kind of generating new revenue streams, engaging your players in different ways, and helping people monetize their user-generated content. I just want to open it out to the floor again to just get a view. Does anyone put your hands up? What's your view on NFTs and games? I know it's a really contentious issue, but I would love to hear anyone's views on NFTs. I'm going to pick on people if they don't answer. Sorry?
I think it's cool.
You think it's cool?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think you can easier not to do it. I think people should do it because of it's like it gives more value to the game. And the best part is if you could transfer and if you could transfer the value between different games. So like example, if I play Fortnite and I don't feel like playing Fortnite anymore, now play COD, I should transfer the values the tokens or whatever I need to other games. Like a lot of value will be unlocked if people think about the entire what's the right word for that entire can't pronounce the word. But you know what I mean, like being able to transfer assets between one game to another.
Yeah, interoperability. You mean? Yeah. And does anyone have a counter view to that? Like, yeah, go on, please.
So I'm not convinced on the technology reasoning behind using it when other technologies provide similar outputs. Steam's marketplace, as an example, has allowed users to trade assets between each other. Steam takes a cut, the developer takes a cut. I am not convinced yet as to why blockchain is a technology to get revenue from that area when other technologies exist in the past that seem to do the same thing. So that's where I'm.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, similar point from me as well, where I don't really see how NFTs can do things better than existing things do, and even that at a disadvantage because it is enormous costs, monetarily, and to the environment of actually upholding NFTs in the blockchain. It is a way of generating money through artificial scarcity, I suppose. This is like example, if anyone knows Pirate Software, I imagine how much people will, he's given one example of a company that basically maintained player saves via NFTs. But the problem was if something went wrong with someone's account, like they accidentally made a purchase or someone hacked it, normally with a database you can just go and change it and revert it, but with an NFT, because it's on a blockchain, you can't, because it's kind of locked in.
Yeah, so I think there's like pros and cons. Basically, it's the blockchain technology that makes it, you just mentioned that something intrinsic about the blockchain technology which makes it, potentially irreversible, which, some people might think is a good thing, some people might think it's a bad thing because you can't go into the database. And similarly, there are really, really successful platforms that have marketplaces like Roblox that don't use blockchain technology. They actually had one of the digital fashion is one of the NFT types that a lot of these metaverses use. But Roblox has no NFT functionality, and it still had the highest selling digital Birkin ever. Like, it sold for millions. So whether or not you need, and then I think in the past the argument for NFTs is creator royalties, but a lot of people have a lot of platforms have clamped down on creator royalties anyway. So now it's like, what's the point? If you can't get creator royalties. So we'll see how it all turns out. But yeah, one of the major things is scarcity. Like, you can't create more than a certain amount of NFTs, and you can trace them on the blockchain. Whereas in Roblox, potentially you could create 1 million of those £1 million Birkin digital bags. So yeah, interesting conversation about whether they have as much utility as we thought. And there's definitely the speculative side of NFTs that people buy into as well. I guess another kind of benefit of NFTs is avatars. So once you've got your avatar NFT, no one else can kind of copy you. It's your unique, NFT avatar. So that's another potential, use case for NFTs. So the legal challenges and compliance aspects of NFTs. So one thing that a lot of people have publicised is rug pulls with NFT projects. Is you have all of these NFTs, the game goes down, or potentially the project never even happens. What happens then? And one way of dealing with this, and a lot of things can be dealt with in this way, is having really, really clear terms of service and making sure that you communicate with your players and your users in a really transparent way about what happens. For example, you can use buyback policies. So I've personally experienced this when I bought a Metaverse piece of land somewhere, and the project really, it was really slow rolling, and I was like, I no longer want to invest in this. There wasn't a mechanism in the contract for me to buy back my land, or for them to buy back my land, or for me to do something with that land. So I just thought, wouldn't it be cool if, when you're launching the project, to have a clear buyback policy at a certain point based on milestones. So, if we don't achieve X, Y, Z milestones, then you as a community have these rights. Another thing we talked about is portability. So, if you can create NFTs are portable and people have more than one use case for, that is a way of ensuring consumer protection and just building that into your terms and conditions and using roadmaps properly. So not all of these things are legal per se, they're more kind of commercial approaches, but these will avoid kind of legal problems, if you will, if you're kind of transparent about this stuff. Regulation and taxation is another thing that you need to think about with NFTs, because there is sometimes, depending on how you structure your NFT, what your NFT does, what it's used for, can be classified by the FCA in the UK as digital security or a digital asset. And in that case, you would need to basically be registered with the FCA, which comes with a lot of cost and a lot of compliance stuff. So it's a very, very complicated area. I'm not going to go into it, but basically, if you create something that is just for gameplay, it's just for entertainment purposes rather than for speculative or trading purposes, you can't sell it or exchange it for any kind of fiat or cryptocurrency, then generally it would fall outside of the FCA regulatory regime. But a lot of times people do combine those different types of things and have some kind of trading marketplace within the game. So that's when you have to be careful that you're not falling within that regulatory parameter. Similarly, if you use in-game currency, that can be classified as e-token. So you have to watch for, what you're actually using this in-game currency for. Is it just in-game, or does it have some kind of value outside? Because if it does, then potentially that could fall within the regulatory scope. Taxation as well. Sometimes you could be taxed for NFTs if you're making income out of it. You could also be taxed for capital gains if you're kind of selling it for a profit. So all of these things are potentially things that people have to think about if they're enabling users to create NFTs and then sell them. Perhaps you need to put some policies in place, or just put it in your terms and conditions and make them aware. And then the final thing is fraud and security. So if you are FCA regulated, there's various things you need to do. But even if you're not, you still need to be aware of these things, because it could be potentially enabling fraud and money laundering. So for example, just like the digital Birkin bag I mentioned, that potentially could have been a massive money laundering scam, because you're just creating this digital asset and someone's paying millions of pounds for it, and it gets sold and the money's out of the game. So you just need to be careful. It's a very serious issue. You need to basically report it if you have any suspicions about that kind of thing. And then finally, dispute resolution. So if you've got peer-to-peer stuff happening in your game and they fall out, what happens? How do you deal with it? What's going to be the mechanism that you resolve that? So these are all things that you need to potentially think about if you're developing a bit more complex game with these kinds of different tokens and NFTs in there. So the next thing is AI generated worlds, which is really, really exciting. I think it's a really cool use of AI. I don't know what people think about using AI in dynamically generating different worlds, stories, dialogues, and just making it much more of an engaging process for the user. And again, the benefits are that you can have infinite content creation, you can potentially lower development costs, and you can personalize your experience to the player. With this, there's various different challenges as well. So there's IP ownership rights. So for example, if someone creates something within your game, who owns that environment? Who owns that piece of little creation of content, or whether it's a tree or a world or a character or something? And you have to be careful that you define your licensing and ownership policies well. So I have, in the digital fashion space, I've been part of platforms where essentially when you signed up to be a part of that platform, they made you sign all your IP. It was ridiculous. All your IP goes to the game developer, and the user doesn't get any IP at all, and they're allowed to license it and use your creations in that game as they see fit. That's one way of doing it. Another way is to basically say that the creator owns the IP and they're licensing it to the game. So you just have to work out like where those licensing and ownership rights sit. There's game stability and performance. So this is just a general kind of software issue that happens with any kind of software, but you just have to make sure that especially if you're integrating your game with another platform, that you make sure that you are not taking on all the liability for something that goes wrong as a result of something happening in your game. So that is also something to think about, especially if you're doing B2B integrations, to just make sure that that liability is placed appropriately and fairly. Because if you're using AI, that can happen. That's more likely to happen. And then there's bias as well. So this is if you're using any kind of generative AI, you just have to make sure that your data sets and the way you're creating things are not biased in a certain direction. And I'll come to why that is important, because it's something that's mentioned in the EU AI Act. And the last thing I'm going to talk about is AI-powered NPCs, which are another cool kind of trend, like having conversations with NPCs and just making them, have their own kind of character based on the player. And it makes in-game interactions more realistic. It can also make the difficulty harder or adapt to the player. And it makes the game compelling, hopefully. And I've already touched on this, so more immersive worlds, low development costs, and personalised storytelling. And the legal challenges here, NPC behaviour liability. This is I never even thought I'd say those three words together, because it's just really, really kind of a weird sentence. But basically, who takes the liability for how the NPC behaves in the game? They might say offensive or misleading things. There's been examples for virtual environments like Meta where certain characters have been harassing other characters. I don't know if they're NPCs or other players, but there's various things that can happen, and you just need to make sure that you properly moderate what's happening in the environment. You set clear terms of service, and you're able to kick people off if they violate those terms of service. There's also a balance between kind of the freedom of having NPCs that are kind of acting in a way spontaneously, and also the controls that you need to maintain the safety of the environment. And this isn't necessarily strictly a legal thing. It's more of kind of thinking about what your policies are. So a lot of times when I'm advising businesses, it's not on just strictly legal things. It's also, have you thought about what your internal policies are in dealing with this stuff? How are you going to deal with it when it arises? Because it probably will, and you probably need some kind of mechanism to deal with it when it happens. And then also, finally, AI transparency. So this is something that's mentioned in the EU AI Act. They put an emphasis on AI fairness, transparency, and bias. Those are the three things that they want to really get people to focus on. And transparency means explainability as well. So how are these NPC making decisions? Like, if they're interactive players and they affect the players' decisions, then at least in the back end, you should be able to kind of track how those decisions are being made, just in case you're ever audited or anyone kind of asks you if it causes harm to anyone. This is how our AI is set up. This is how it it works, which is kind of easier said than done with AI. So some conclusions and future considerations. So AI and blockchain offer new revenue models, automation and engagement. You must think about compliance, security and ethical risks. We need more industry collaboration with regulators, because regulators, I don't think, are really, they don't really know about the gaming industry that much. They struggle with things like crypto, they struggle with things like NFTs, and it's taken a long, long time to kind of iron out those issues, but it is happening. The EU AI Act is really, really, the seminal piece of legislation that you need to get to grips with if you're using AI. The FCA and tax is something that potentially could impact if you're dealing with crypto or NFTs or in-game currency, and GDPR is something that you're probably all familiar with, so I haven't really talked about it too much, but essentially if you're collecting data and personal data especially, you just need to make sure that you're compliant with data and privacy laws. So that's it from me. This is my email if you have any kind of questions. Doesn't have to just be legal, it could just be, thinking of doing this game, what's the best way of structuring it? A lot of times I say, yeah, you can do this feature, but why don't you just slightly change it like this so that, you don't get into any trouble. I'm also on LinkedIn, you can search me, Rita Sheth, and that's it from me. But I'd love to hear from you if you've got any key concerns and challenges, especially if you're developing a game right now using any of these technologies. I'll be here for like another hour as well if you want to speak to me in private. So yeah.
Let's take some questions now. If there are any.
Yeah.
So yeah, quick round of applause to say thank you to Rita. So do we have any questions in the room?
There was one there.
Wanna go there?
One there. Yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
So, two questions actually. Firstly, for clarity, could you very briefly describe that recent EU regulation you mentioned?
The EU AI Act.
Yeah.
So basically it's an AI Act that regulates how the AI is used. So if you're marketing if you have EU consumers, or if you use servers in the EU, then you should be compliant with the EU AI Act. So even UK companies, they need to consider it. And basically what they do is they divide things into 3 risk levels. So low risk, medium risk and high risk, and basically things that shouldn't be done at all. For most of people in this room, if you're developing a game, you don't have to worry too much about it, because you won't really be in the high risk category. The high risk category is for people that are basically infringing on people's rights, essentially, and people's safety. So I was chatting to someone about this just by the bar. But if you're using gamification rather than game development, it's probably more. It probably impacts you more. And the reason why I say that is because gamification is used by a lot of kind of industries now, like healthcare, finance, education, and those are intrinsically high risk kind of industries that operate in sensitive areas with sensitive types of data. So you're more likely to be in the high risk category then, and there's certain things that you need to do, and the penalties are very, very severe if you violate those. If you're just creating a game for fun, it's less likely that you're going to be in that high risk category. You'll probably just be in medium or low. And the medium one is just things like, as I said, make sure that your AI is transparent, make sure you're doing a disclaimer, like if you're actually using AI within your game, like NPC dialogues, you should say, we're using AI to generate this, those kinds of things. They're quite easy to comply with. You just need to make sure that you do it.
Thank you. And second, you mentioned AI in NPCs. If you could just clarify what specific it is, because AI, like NPC AI, is already a term we've been using for many years, and it's been like, in short, building basically behavior trees. So like AI is like not only regarded as generative AI as we have nowadays, but more so like the AI or the NPC will be set up to like, if these conditions do this, and it's like a set of commands. Is it a different type of AI that you mentioned in relation to AI NPCs earlier?
So you're talking about like programming logic, right, as opposed to kind of AI. So I think that would not fall, if it's not using AI, then it wouldn't fall within the EU AI Act.
But we use the same word, so just to clarify what specifically you meant by those, like what specifically you put on in the NPCs that you mentioned earlier, referenced earlier.
Yeah, so I was thinking more generative, generative AI, generative kind of storylines, depending on what the player is actually typing in, and then plugging in that into that some kind of generative model to kind of feedback That's what I was thinking of for that.
So like automatically generated dialogues or
Yeah, exactly. Like
randomized
dynamically.
action now,
Yeah.
walk to this point in the thing.
Exactly, like dynamically personalized AI. And I think the personalized part is important as well, because that touches on things like data protection, because potentially they might be giving over sensitive information about themselves, and that means that you're at a higher level of what you need to comply with under data protection laws as well.
Thank you.
Hi Rita, thanks
Hello.
for that. My name's Verity. I'm Not a Machine, which is audio post-production agency. So I'm kind of on the fringes of the games industry, but I have, for example, composers that create music for Fortnite, you know, as external composers, or I've just had some actors who've been in Kingdom Come Deliverance too. So I'm kind of wondering, and I think this chap actually raised the question in my head about generative AI and both music and also voiceover. What are the legal implications? I mean, I'll probably make a bit of a statement here. Obviously, there are huge ethical implications, especially for people that, you know, create original music, or obviously, particularly for voice actors, you know, their voice is being kind of used to train these big models. So what are the legal implications though for, say, games developers to use generative AI to create new voices, for example, or new music?
Using generative AI?
Yes.
So I think we're in a bit of a strange space, and this goes back to my slide about, you know, the tech is moving fast and the industry is moving faster than the law can keep up with. Obviously, we've had lots of kind of, you know, cases that have been brought already against Stable Diffusion and things like that for copyright infringement, and they haven't gone very far. Essentially, we're in a space now where, unfortunately, what's done has been done. So if they're creating things from a foundational model like GPT or Stable Diffusion, I think essentially nothing will happen. I mean, unfortunately, you know, the damage has been done, and the IP's already been like scraped and used. If it's a new voice, for example, I actually licensed my voice the other day. Use 11 Labs. I don't know if anyone's used 11 Labs. So I wanted to use it to create my own kind of AI generated voiceovers without having to record it constantly. It's an amazing piece of software. They basically have terms and conditions that basically say I give a license to anyone now to use my voice and will pay me. So if it's something that's being recorded for the game fresh, then you can enter into a licensing agreement with the game to license your essentially, now they're starting to call it personality rights.
Yes.
So personality rights are things like voice, likeness, things like that. It's a developing area of the law, actually. There's nothing in the UK law about personality rights right now. It's a bit of a developing area. So I would assume that it's covered by copyright at the moment.
Yeah. So could somebody technically refuse that then? So, I mean, in my contracts, for example, I mean, I'm doing, say, like, not game stuff, advertising, you know, I'll always say, you know, this voice or these voices can't be used to sort of train AI. I mean, whether it has an impact or not, but, you know, for games, is that potentially something that an actor or an agency could actually say, you know, you can use this for this game, but actually it can't be used outside?
Oh yeah, absolutely. You should, you know, if you are doing that, then you should absolutely cover that in your contract. And now, as people are becoming more savvy to things like their content's being scraped and things like that, they're actually putting it in their terms and conditions on the website saying we don't allow anyone, this is not open for, you know, people to scrape and AI to kind of use. So it's taken a bit of time to have those kind of disclaimers in place, but yeah, you can definitely do that. But in terms of, like, you know, where we are, I don't think we're, you know, it's going to go backwards now. I mean, what's done is done, and unfortunately they obviously have ripped off loads of people's content to create those foundational models.
Yeah. Is it different in the States because of the laws in the US? So I think with the US there's kind of about this whole like likeness, and, you know, you can't sort of rip that off. I mean, I'm a bit naive to it all, but do you know if it's kind of different?
Yeah, so I think this is a whole kind of personality rights debate that I'm kind of following. Like I don't think it's got to a particular place of being hard law in the UK. I'm not sure what the position is in the US. I imagine it's somewhat similar because they're having to deal with similar issues like deep fakes of celebrities and things like that, using people's voices without their permission, which actually it didn't have a category before, and now they're calling it personality rights. So it is quite relevant for game development because it's like avatar creation, that kind of thing, you know, ripping off potentially someone's likeness to create an avatar, that kind of thing. So you have to keep an eye on it, see what happens.
Thank you.
So I have a small follow-up to that because it's really interesting. So, like, do you know, are there any examples of like the efficacy of like clauses in contracts where you put it in because you're like, I don't want my likeness, you know, taken and AI trained on it, and it put out into the. So a high-profile case was when OpenAI used Scarlett Johansson. Right? She said no, and then they used it anyway. Are there any cases going? Obviously, that's in America. But are there any cases going through?
Did they use it though? I think she put a stop to that, didn't she?
Oh, right, okay.
I don't know what happened, but I thought that she actually managed to get them to cease that.
Right. Okay. That's exactly what. Yeah. Just if there are any cases where it's been taken and actually, they've got their wrist slapped and actually it's been effective.
Yeah. I mean, I would think that, you know, it's interesting when all of this stuff develops with new tech, because essentially what you're doing is applying the old law in a new way. And I think it would come down to things like, you know, proving the IP is the same. So, you know, putting forth enough evidence to say, no, this is actually exactly the same as Scarlett Johansson's voice. It's a unique voice, you know, and all of those kinds of arguments, which I think, from my understanding, I think she managed to kind of, you know, get over that hurdle. So, yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. About the personality rights, what's that one? As a, because I do a bit of background acting for like film and TV, and it was interesting because once we were as extras, we're often not getting many rights in those ways. As in, once I was with this, it was pretty cool. I liked it. We did like this. We did stand in this weird room with lots of cameras, then like scanned up our likeness completely in the outfit or whatever, then to be put in the background. Would that the EU regulation things, would that possibly affect that? Because I know that in our agreements it was like they have full rights to do whatever they like with it, really. But is that going to be possibly affected in the future? Because
I don't think it's an AI thing. It's more potentially a sensitive piece of personal data, because personal data is any data that you can be identified by, and sensitive personal data is one, you know, it's even higher threshold of how you need to be careful with it, because it's things like biometric information. So a body scan is that, and so they would need to, you know, abide by those obligations and keep that really, really secure. I'm not sure they could. They'd have to be really careful about how they exploit that, even if with your consent.
Cool. Thank you.
Coming back a bit earlier to the question about, or the answer about licensing, how legally enforceable is putting in your license, EU license a clause, please don't use my work for training AI? Is it going to be like difficulties defending that in court? Because
who would the contract be with? So are you saying that you're a game creator and you're providing some service to a game studio? Like, what's the scenario?
For example, creating a game service, or the example that you create assets and provide them. Is going to be difficult in court because it's still like a legally developing thing, or is this going to be a licensing?
No, ownership is, you know, whatever you put in the contract. So if you have created something and then you've entered into a contract and you've said, I have specified you're only allowed to use this for these purposes, they're not allowed to then use it for a commercially different purpose. That's a breach of contract, essentially. So it's quite important to get those contractual terms right, but it depends on your negotiating power. So if they strike it out and say, actually, we don't want to buy it then, you know, that's basically how those commercial negotiations go. But essentially what you put in the contract is, you know, enforceable, and if they breached it, it would be a breach of contract. So yeah, protect your rights as far as you can in the commercial agreements that you make, and you know, if you're dealing with someone fair and ethical, then they shouldn't have a problem with those kinds of things.
some random public person just takes it and like basically steals it to train the AI?
How would they steal it from the game? From scraping it? You could also deal with that in the contract as well. You could say that they have to put into their terms and conditions that, you know, they will not allow people to scrape the games. They're liable for any third-party copyright infringement. They provide you with an indemnity to that effect. There's various things that you can do. I mean, obviously you can't completely, you know, stop people doing things, but you can make sure that you have a recourse if that happens against them.
And if that goes to court, that will be like surrounding copyright laws. That's a prosecution.
It wouldn't be a copyright issue. It would be a breach of contract, because they probably, you know, have breached something in the contract to enable that to happen. If you're taking action against a third party that's not party to the contract, then it would be a copyright infringement claim. Yeah.
So follow up to that scenario. So we've got a content creator who's created, say, visuals for a game. They have a contract with that game developer and have agreed that the game developer won't use that to train AI or for that data to be scraped in any way. But then you've got a third party scraping that data and using that as a training mechanic. How can that company defend against that happening? If we've then got someone liable who we've got a contract that says not going to be used like that, we've got no way to defend against that. If someone literally takes a screenshot and trains on a screenshot, there's no way to defend against that alone.
There's no way to if you can prove it, then there's stuff you can do, but how would you? It's difficult to prove that has happened.
I'm just meaning in that circumstance, if the creators come to me as the company, for example, and say my IP rights have been infringed. And you said you wouldn't do that, I'm going to go, well, I didn't do that.
Well, yeah.
It's a third party that's done that.
And they would have to, I suppose, prove. Well, they would have to prove that has happened. I don't know how they would prove that has happened in a conclusive way. But let's say that it's something that absolutely could not have come from anywhere else. You know, because obviously, as you know, like the way you train AIs, you take lots and lots of data, right?
Yes.
And so it's not just built on one piece of data. So it's very difficult to actually prove that the reason why they've had this benefit is because they've scraped your specific data. But assume that you are able to prove that, then essentially, as long as you have followed the things in your contract that you've basically you've basically said on your terms and conditions on your gaming website, no one's allowed to scrape on it. There's nothing further you can really do to prevent that.
But so in that instance, so the artist responsible for creating the art and the company responsible for using that art have both got a potential claim against the person who scraped it and used it.
Yeah.
It's provable
Against the terms and conditions of the site.
Yeah.
They've basically breached terms and conditions of the gaming studio because the gaming studio says you're not allowed to scrape.
Okay, that makes sense.
But scraping's a really hard thing. I mean,
Okay.
I don't know how everyone's doing it, unfortunately. So it's one of those things that to keep an eye on.
Anyone else?
I will be around if you need to ask me anything for another little while. So.
I'm James too. I asked a question about blockchain stuff.
Okay.
I have a question about blockchain forking.
Okay.
Because blockchains often fork, and Sega, like with fungible tokens, that doesn't tend to be a problem. When a blockchain forks, you get two separate copies of the blockchain, and so with fungible tokens, like with cryptocurrencies, that doesn't represent an issue because then you end up with two pots of cryptocurrency. With NFTs, firstly that will affect scarcity, but where that NFT is a receipt and supposedly an ownership or a licensing or something, or a real world artifact, let's say a piece of land in Decentraland or something that could potentially have quite a lot of value, then blockchain forking can become something of an issue. Then you've got effectively two receipts, both claiming ownership for this one asset, and it will inevitably result in, over time, those assets being in different people's hands, right? Theoretically. That's it, with all the amount of assets that these things manage, it will inevitably be the case that you'll end up with, but blockchain forking will inevitably end up with multiple different tokens denoting ownership to different people. And if we accept that the blockchains there are decentralized, there is no one entity that dictates which is the true blockchain, there's no one centralized agency making determinations over valid claims and not, then who would own, how do we,
This is a really difficult issue that comes down to basically how you resolve disputes when it comes to the blockchain, which is an entirely different kind of topic. But basically there's various things that you can do. So when you do a smart contract, you can have a dispute resolution mechanism and various things that happen if something like that happens. So you can say, in that case, I don't know, I'm just thinking off the top of my head, the NFT would revert to the original creator or something like that. I mean, there's various things you can do. There's also kind of various dispute resolutions methods that you can do, like off chain and on chain basically. But yeah, that's a really kind of niche question. I've never seen that happen with an
No,
NFT.
I haven't heard about it either, but it has been something that's occurred to me as something that might present legal problems in the future, particularly as more assets have their ownership denoted by both through the blockchain.
Yeah, I think probably what would happen if there was like a fork in the blockchain is that the creator or the developer of the fork would then kind of list that NFT as like a sub version of the original NFT. I'm not really sure how it would work, but obviously it wouldn't make sense if like both of them had the exact same what's it called? If they had the exact same kind of identifier, right? They are still two different assets, even if the blockchain's forked. It's just creating like another version of it. So
Yeah, but there is only one version of that asset ultimately. So if I were to sell on one that asset to one person and then on the fork sell it to somebody else, then obviously that could create legal implications. Or if they ended up in different people's hands through, let's say, when somebody passes away and they inherit their things. There's all sorts of, I guess, different reasons how they might end up forked into different people's hands, and then there could be also legal challenges as to which one is legitimate.
I've never come across that in a game scenario ever. I don't know. I think if there was a fork in a blockchain and there was like two NFTs that would be created, I think basically what would happen is that they would be classified slightly differently. They wouldn't be the same. I don't think they would be the same, considered the same asset. And you can deal with blockchain disputes in the smart contract.
Just to iterate on what she said, that has actually happened before, but in the Ethereum blockchain. I don't know if anyone here has heard about Ethereum Classic. So like a couple of years ago, some very smart people stole like hundreds of millions worth of Ethereum. So like the whole community had to get together and we had to like, I say we, I wasn't part of that. They had to get together and figure out what to do. So, I mean, obviously this is blockchain and you couldn't revert back the transaction. So what they did was that like, I think the reason was that like the money that they stole was meant to be used for something like a social cause or something. So what the whole community agreed was that we're going to like fork the blockchain records before that whole transaction happened. So that led to the birth of Ethereum Classic, which it kind of still trades, but it's not as valuable as the actual like Ethereum blockchain that we all agree on.
But is that what happened? So the NFTs that were created on the Ethereum Classic, they could be duplicated onto the fork?
No, so what do you mean? So could you?
So I think that lady was saying that basically if there was sorry, this is really technical now, but basically if there's a fork, then the NFTs that were created.
Oh yeah, everything happens. The fork is basically a copy. It's like a bit for bit, byte for byte copy of the original. So like.
So there was was no mechanism after forking to identify them as a post-fork NFT.
There is, like, you also understand, this is, how would I put this right now? I'm going to get a bit technical. So, the blockchain is just a basic record. It's not like some voodoo magic or whatnot.
Yeah,
It's just basically like a text file on your laptop. The only thing that makes the difference is that it's on his laptop, it's on his laptop, it's on his laptop, it's on her laptop, right? But what happens is if, let's say everyone there, let's say we all start with the same record, then for some reason everybody from here, there, decided to have like a different idea behind, or like a different concept behind what the project should be, and everybody from here has like a different concept about what the project should be. They could have their own database, and they could have their own database. But if maybe you are the project supervisor, right, and you agree to go with these people, right, their records will be considered as canon, and these people here, their records may not be canon. They could still be traded by some people, or they could have value by some people. But for the fact that let's say you're Vitalik, the owner of Ethereum, say that, okay, this record is one we are using, right? That means everybody will just follow you and be like.
But I think that the point is, would the NFTs pre-fork and post-fork be identical?
Yeah, it will be identical, basically.
Okay.
Just same basic records.
I don't know how that could be the case though, if like, anyway, yeah, I'll look into that, because if an NFT is created on the blockchain and then something happens to change the NFT in some way, then it would be a different.
This might be a conversation.
Yeah, let's take that.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Because that's a really serious problem then. Because basically it is, because the whole point of NFTs are they're supposed to be immutable, kind of, like what you know what you're getting. If you can fork something off into a different project, and the NFT then basically gets to be some kind of satellite, the same thing that can almost be kind of replaced with the original, then it's like quite a serious problem that someone needs to look at legally and technically.
It's like you can print like a dollar bill, but doesn't make it an actual dollar. Do you get what I mean?
Yeah, I think that's what I'm saying, that they're not the same. One's a copy of the other.
It's, how do I put it now? It's technically the same, but the only difference is just perceived value. It's like, technically it is the same, just perceived value. Like,
it sounds like what you were saying was that the dispute resolution is there from the beginning, because it's like the project manager decides.
Yeah, the project manager, that's actually the answer. The project manager decides.
Yeah, I mean, perhaps people haven't been putting that into their smart contracts. They haven't anticipated that this kind of thing could happen to a project. But yeah, this is one of the things that like potentially, we should think about, is that if you're doing a project on a specific blockchain, especially if it's like one that gets forked quite a lot, or is changing all the time, to think about like what would happen in this case, because you don't want your in-game NFT to be devalued because the blockchain's getting forked constantly, and then that original NFT that you've created is not as valuable or as worthwhile as what happened after the fork. Anyway, yeah, something to think about. There's probably creative ways that you can deal with it. Like one of the things I said is that in that case it reverts back to the creator essentially. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you very much. No, that's brilliant. I think that's it for questions. So yeah, like I say, any more at the bar? But yeah, another massive round of applause for Rita, please. And we'll get a drink.
Yeah. That was really interesting.
Yeah, it was brilliant.
I found it really interesting.
Good. Yeah, no, fantastic. I genuinely found it really, really interesting.
People are like engaged with these topics.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely.
Hopefully a lot going on.
Yeah.
Like they do tend to be quite controversial, but I also think that like makes
I thought
really
the
good
approach was
conversation.
brilliant.